So, in the beginning, God. First there was this. So we're talking about these creation stories, and last week we talked about the creation story in the Tao, some of the Hindu ideas of creation, although the Hindus talk about several creations, knowing that life is cyclical. We talked about the creation story in 1 John. We talked about how the Course in Miracles approaches creation. And you know, they're really very much the same. In the beginning, God, the One. And then the One makes two. The two is not really two. The two is God expressing in a different way. Light and dark, earth and sky, water and land, plants and animals, sun and moon, humans in the image, containing the nature. God, part of and responsible to the earth. You get that? I like this translation that doesn't say we have dominion over the earth, we get to boss the earth around. It means we are responsible. We are put in place because we belong to all of it, and it belongs to us, and we are responsible to it, and we're responsible for it. And we are blessed to prosper in the goodness of it. And God saw it was good. And it is good. And God rested. And that's a story for us too. We do what is ours to do, and then we rest. So that whole first chapter of Genesis is a beautiful poem. Right? It's gorgeous poetry. It's gorgeous poetry written down by, first told in oral traditions, and then written down by an artist who was obviously beautiful with words, who imagined how the glory of all that is came into being, with no scientific knowledge of it, but with the absolute inner knowing. In the beginning, God. And everything that came forth, an expression of God. Now remember, we talked about myth. Myth means a story that helps to make sense of a confusing world. And myths are always told in hindsight. We look back at what happened, and then we make sense of it. We make meaning of it in the best way that we know how. Usually myths are to answer a question. Metaphor. Metaphor is when one thing stands in place of another. When we say one thing as an illustration, because of the word that we use is something we understand, and so we use it in place of a concept that's a little harder to understand, to make it a little more concrete for ourselves. And metaphysics is about first principles. It's about being, knowing, cause, identity, time, and space. And so we're going to approach the second creation story. Now, all that was the first creation story. The second creation story, the creation story that we call the story of Adam and Eve, not to answer so much where we're from, but to answer the question, why? Why are we here? Okay, the first creation story was written. This is where we come from, God. So what's the point? And I'm going to not read that whole second chapter, because it's even longer than the first one that I read, but I'm going to sum up. Let me explain. No, it's too long. Let me sum up. No rain, the earth was empty, there was no one to work, okay? The second one contradicts the first one. The first one says, God said, make green things come up, and green things exploded all over the earth. The second chapter says, there was nothing on the earth because nothing had started growing yet, and God needed somebody to tend it and make it work. He needed a man to work the soil. Right? And so he makes man of what there is, earth. There's dirt. And I love, though, it says, and God breathes life, a soul. God breathes life, a soul. Basically, what this means to me is that God has brought into expression physical form, the earth. And God is not satisfied, let's say, with a physical form that is inanimate. And so he breathes life. He breathes life into this godlike creature, into an image of God self. Therefore, God can experience God's self. And then he plants a perfect garden to put that man in. And at the center of that garden, he puts this beautiful tree. And he says, you can eat anything in this garden except from that tree. That tree is the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And if you eat of that tree, you will die. And then God saw that Adam was lonely, and so he put him to sleep. He took one of his ribs and he created a woman out of it. Now I'm not going to go into the reasons why the writer might have written that woman came from only one small part of man. But let's just say that in the beginning, God created male and female of everything, is what the whole first story says. So God created male and female for this human Adam, which it never says in the Bible was the first human. It just is telling the story of a human. And so Adam and Eve are happy. They're in the garden. They can eat any fruit that they want. They're getting along with everybody. They're in joy, in love. They are so much in joy that they are like a fish in water. They cannot be aware of their joy because all there is joy. Just as a fish cannot be aware that a fish is in water. Now, the moment you take a fish out of water, whoa! The fish gets a quick and full understanding of what water is and needs to be back there. Okay? I'm giving you a little foreshadowing of the why here, perhaps. So why would God say, don't eat that, you'll die? Why would he put the most beautiful thing in there and say, don't eat that, you'll die? Well, first of all, we need to understand that God is not something outside of ourselves. That we are that. So this oneness of soul, this oneness of beauty, of all love, of all understanding, perhaps says to itself, I can sit in this beautiful garden forever. But if I want to feel what it feels like, if I want to experience it to its fullest, then I can eat from this tree of good and evil, of life. And not, I'm going to kill you if you eat from the tree. Adam and Eve wouldn't have eaten from the tree if they really thought God was going to kill them the moment they ate from it. He just said, you will die, right? So here's the deal. If I eat from this tree of life, if I decide to take on individuation, incarnation, then I am agreeing up front that I will die. That it is a temporary state. And I'm agreeing up front that in that temporary state, I'm not just going to be experiencing Eden. I'm going to open myself to experiencing everything. Everything. Wow. When you look at it from that direction. Why? So that we can experience what it is to be living souls, living expressions of God. We have chosen to go out of the water for a while. Just like a fish. I'm going to go out of the water and then I'm going to really know what water is. And it may be a struggle to get back in. And I may die on shore. But since I know that I'm an eternal being, that I am not this fish body, that I am not this human body, I am a soul, then it doesn't really matter what struggle I go through here. This is all about learning. I don't have to go back in the water because in the end I am the water. I am the water. I'm using a lot of metaphor here. Are you getting what I'm saying? So not where we came from or how we came to be, but why we came to be. And then all of the story, it goes on to say that when the serpent, the snake, tempted Eve and said, you won't die. You know, he's just trying to keep all the secrets for himself. And so she eats it. And then she says, Adam, I didn't die and I ate it. You should eat it too. It's really cool. And I won't go into the possible reasons why the men who wrote this down might have decided to blame the female for all of this, except to say that until about 1,500 years ago, all wisdom was considered feminine. That the female part of us, not just females versus males, but the feminine part of every one of us is where our wisdom comes from. The feeling part, not the logic part. That's not wisdom, that's intelligence, that's smarts. But wisdom is the feeling part of us. And so logically, maybe it doesn't make sense for the fish to go out of the water. But in wisdom, if I want to experience myself, if I want to feel, if I want to learn, if I want to grow, if I want to experience, then wisdom comes forth and says yes. And I know it might be hard. There's an easier path that logic will lead me to. But if I take this harder path, there's so much more to learn. There's so much richness in store for me. And so yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to eat it knowing that, yeah, I'm going to die. Then I'm going to live through whatever I live through, and at the end of it, I'm going to die. But with the knowing behind that I can't die. I am the water. I am the garden. I am the Spirit. I am God. I am the original love that created everything. I'm perfectly safe. This is a safe place to be. It was only when we decided at some point that this is all there is, that our ego stepped in and said, well, okay, I can navigate this place, but instead of navigating this place with the idea that I'm going to learn so that I know the love that I am, I'm going to navigate this place in a way that lets me stand above other people, that lets me get my way and shove other people around, that lets me look good and make everybody else look bad, that makes me survive in my human self, regardless of what happens to my soul, and that is willing to put other expressions of God, other humans, other forms, other animals, plants, the earth itself at risk for the good of my ego. So I can have a little more convenience in this life, so that I can tell myself that I'm higher, larger, better, more tremendous than anything else. When we started thinking that, when we started letting the ego, the serpent, the crafty one, say, yeah, well, you're love, but what's love? You can have money. You can have dominion. You can have power. You can drive a nicer car than everybody else. And it's not just about material things. A lot of people in life, that is their journey, is to explore material things. Those of us who, that's not necessarily our journey to accumulate physical things, doesn't mean we're egoless. It means we put value on different things. Maybe we put value on being right. I don't know anybody like that, but it's a possibility. I need you to know, those of you in the Facebook audience, that my daughter is sitting right in front of me, and her eyes are so far back in her head. She cannot see at this moment. Yeah, that's one of my things. I want to be right, and I want to be good. And when my ego wants to be good, my ego can see so clearly that it's impossible for my ego to be good. So it works harder and harder, and it gets sneakier and sneakier, and it hides, and it pretends, which is all such a sad thing when I put my ego aside and realize, oh, my goodness was never in my ego, and it was never going to be found by my ego. My goodness is already here. So I'm getting to experience other things. We forget. That's what it says in the Course in Miracles. We forget. We forgot where we came from. And so now we have to make our way back there. And we're doing it through this school called Earth, called Human Incarnation. Now, I know I'm reading a lot into what is there, but there's a lot of wisdom in there. So when the writers of the Bible wrote this down, I'm not saying that they had this total understanding, but I'm saying that they came from a place where they understood what was going on now in human life. That if God is perfect, then why is life so hard? That's the question they're trying to answer. And ego says, if things are going wrong, you must have done something bad. That's what ego says. So what did we do bad? Well, the first thing we did was go, wasn't me, it was her. And then she says, wasn't me, it was that snake. If he hadn't been here, I'd never done it. And the snake said, it wasn't me, it was God. If God never put that tree there in the first place, none of this would ever happen. That's what ego does. That's what ego does. That's our confusion. That's what we play out in this world when we forget who we really are. And when we remember those precious moments when we remember who we really are, that we are love, I believe this to the depths of my soul. And I don't care if you call it God, and I don't care if you believe in metaphysics. My soul knowing is that the truth of me is a love that cannot die. And that everything else about me is here to teach me to hold fast to that truth. And so it challenges me. It makes me feel unloving. It makes me feel angry. It makes me feel hurt. It makes me feel ashamed. It makes me feel vengeful. It makes me feel scared. It makes me feel threatened for my survival. It makes me feel like other people are something besides me. That somehow if I can make them do what I need them to do, I will be okay. It makes me think that my being okay is the most important thing here. It leads me in all kinds of circles. And it's okay, because guess what? I agreed to that. I'm going to eat this fruit. And I'm going to die, and first I'm going to live, and life is going to be hard. And so you can see the writers of the Bible. Why do women have to bleed month after month, year after year? And then the only time that they get a break from bleeding is when they're gestating and giving birth, which happens in pain and suffering. Yes, Aaron, in pain and suffering. My daughter's here in front of me again, so I just thought I'd remind her of that. Pain and suffering. Why? Why? Well, then we come up with a reason why. We write a myth to explain. Why does man have to work so hard? Because that was Adam's punishment for having to leave the garden, is now you just don't have stuff just growing up everywhere. You're going to have to actually go and cut down the trees and pull out the rocks and plow the soil and plant the seeds and water them and take the weeds up. And then, if you're lucky and it rains, then you'll get food. Why man has to toil, why woman has to be in pain. The writers of this were writing a myth to explain. And they were writing it partially from that limited understanding of ego that says we must have done something bad. And yet the truth shines through. Even as we write from the limitations of who we seem to be, the truth of who we are shines through. Adam and Eve were meant to go forth and enjoy the world, learn from the world, glean the good from the world. And that's what happened, and that's what we're still doing. That's what we're still doing. So, the answers to this, here's what I get from this creation story. The upshot is God, love, the principle of good, of love, of eternity, breathes life. And that life is not separate. It looks like two, because I got a body surrounding me, but it's really one. In the same way that if you blow up a balloon, the air inside the balloon is not balloon, it's air. You pop the balloon, it's still air, it always was air, it will ever be air. This is my balloon, this skin that I'm wearing. This is what I believe. Because that's the other thing about myth, you can interpret it however you want. This is me. This is how I'm interpreting it. This is how it makes sense to me. This is how it gives me hope. This is how it gives me direction. This is how it gets me to understand that the best I can do in this life is to practice love and compassion and understanding for everyone. This is how I get to know that I am not in charge of anything, but I am responsible to everything. Everything. And that's what feels right to me. That's what feels like love. That's what feels like good. So, if our purpose is to have experience, not just potential, okay, that's another word for law or love, is everything is in potentiality. It's all possible. But until you actually take action, until you actually put something into expression, it stays potential. You don't experience potential. You only experience experience. So we came out of divine potential, perfect love, and we came into experience. And the way that you experience things is there is got to be some kind of tension. And the tension is this life. It's the game we play. We believe in an opposing force, but that's not the truth. It's just another element in our journey. And it's like the Buddha said, life is suffering. Or Scott Peck paraphrases, in life you have suffering. It's only when we think it should be perfect. We should have eaten. We should not have to work hard. We should not ever have any pain. Well, that's what life is. And when you stop struggling against that, when you go, pain is part of it, here I am, might as well learn something from it rather than just be miserable in it. That is when enlightenment is possible. That is when we find our way back into the water of life. That is when we know the love that we are. We are from love. Love is still our purpose. We experience tension and we learn. And we return to the love that we never left. That's my story of creation. Thank you. So we're going to take those ideas into meditation. And I want to start by just doing a little reprise of the face of God. So breathe deeply. And sing if you'd like to. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. So what would it be like if we just relaxed? In this moment, we just let go of all tension, we release, we let go, we claim freedom. Breathe into that. I'm free, I'm unlimited, I am the very face of God. And then we look at those whom it is easy to love because they are pleasing to us and they create us less tension perhaps than others. And we say, you are the face of God. I can see that love in you. You breathe it in. You know who those people are in your life that give you that love, that give it easily, that make it really easy for you to love them. See them in your mind's eye and say, you're the face of God. I see the love shining. much as you love them, they just won't do what you want them to do. Breathe into that. And let yourself have an aha. Ah, you are the face of God. You are bringing me the exact attention that I need to learn to love more freely. To take my little self less seriously. Perhaps to finally learn that I'm not in charge of how things go in this world, but I'm responsible for bringing my love to whatever is going on. Breathe into that love and breathe in the freedom of it. Can you feel it? I invite you to hold in mind somebody that you might say, I've tried to love them. I just can't figure out how. Breathe into the love that you know you are. Whatever amount of love you're allowing yourself to experience in this moment, and know there is no difference between you and them, between you and me, between us and them. There is no difference. And say, you are the face of God. And it is not my job to make you change your face so I can love you more easily. It is my job. It is my responsibility to open up to the love that I am and allow it through. Regardless of what my ego tells me about you. You are the face of God. And I invite you as you go forward from this place to continue this practice, to just take a moment when you feel the tension inside your body that says, oh, this is hard to love. This person, this situation. And recognize that the lack of love is in you, not in them. Ooh, that's hard to say. They're hard to love because the fear in me is getting stirred up. So it's my job to calm the fear and allow the love to come through. The anger in me. Not because I condone actions which are harmful, unjust, or cruel, or mean-spirited, but because the only way for us to learn to overcome all of those things that don't look like love is to bring more love into the situation. It's the only thing that works. Thank you. We say thank you, God, for allowing the love that I am to shine through even just the tiniest bit more. choose how I spend this human life. And I choose love. And so it is.